After studying this module, you shall be able to know the concept of planning, learn the strategy of planning in India, identify different objectives of planning, evaluate different objectives of planning, analyze the strategies and objectives of planning.
Rudimentary economic planning, driving the sovereign authority of the state, was first initiated in India in 1938 by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose when he was the Congress president. And this was drafted by Meghnad Saha. The British Raj also formally established a planning board that was functional from 1944 to 1946. Industrialists and economists independently formulated at least three development plans in 1944. Some scholars have argued that the introduction of planning as an instrument was to transcend the ideological divisions between Gandhi and Nehru. Some other scholars have argued that Planning Commission as a central agency in the context of the plural democracy in India needs to carry out more functions than rudimentary economic planning. After India gained independence, a formal model of planning was adopted, and accordingly, the Planning Commission reporting directly to the Prime Minister of India was established on 23rd March 1950. The Planning Commission does not derive its creation from either the Constitution or any statute, but it is an arm of the central government.
5-year plans are centralized and integrated national economic programs. Joseph Stalin implemented the first 5-year plan in the Soviet Union in the late 1920s. Most communist states and several capitalist countries subsequently have adopted them. China and India both continue to use 5-year plans. India launched its first 5-year plan in 1951, immediately after independence under socialist influence of the first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. The first 5-year plan was one of the most important because it had a great role in the launching of Indian development after independence. Thus, it strongly supported agriculture production and it also launched the industrialization of the country, but less than the second plan, which focused on heavy industries. It built a particular system of mixed economy with a great role for the public sector with an emerging welfare state, as well as a growing private sector represented by some personalities as those who published the Bombay Plan.
The first 5-year plan was launched in 1951, which mainly focused on the development of agricultural sector, and two subsequent 5-year plans covered the period till 1965, followed by a break coinciding with the Indo-Pakistan conflict. Two successive years of drought, devaluation of currency, a general rise in prices, and erosion of resources disrupted the planning process, and after three annual plans between 1966 and 1969, the fourth 5-year plan was adopted in 1969. The eighth plan did not start in 1990 due to the fast changing political situation at the center, and the years 1990-91 and 1991-92 were treated as annual plans. The eighth plan was finally launched in 1992 after the adoption of structural adjustment policies.
Let us now start with the origin of planning in India. The Planning Commission was set up in 1950 to formulate strategies and to bring about development in the economy by utilizing the available resources in the country. Though prior to independence, the National Planning Committee, 1938, the Bombay Plan, given by 8 leading industrialists, the People's Plan, M.N. Roy, were talked about, but they were never implemented. The specific tasks before the Planning Commission in India are the following: 1. Assessing the quantity and quality of the resources of the country, physical, financial, as well as human, and preparing plans for their effective utilization. 2. Preparing 5-year plans to fulfill the targets of economic planning over a long period of time. 3. Laying down the priorities of each 5-year plan in the light of overall objectives. 4. Allocating the available resources for achievement of the objectives of the plan in accordance with the priorities. 5. Specifying guidelines for achievement of the objectives of the plans. 6. Coordinating with the state governments for the execution of the plans. 7. Appraising the progress of the plans and recommending adjustments in them. It should be noted that 5-year plans are prepared to fulfill the overall objectives of economic planning in India. Each 5-year plan lays down certain targets, prepares a plan of investment for their achievement, and sets into motion the mechanism for fulfilling the targets. At the end of the 5-year plan, an appraisal of the achievements during the plan period is made. The next 5-year plan to fulfill the overall objectives is made after taking into account the achievement of the past plan and tasks yet to be achieved. The first Indian Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, presented the first 5-year plan to the Parliament of India and needed urgent attention. The first 5-year plan was launched in 1951, which mainly focused in development of the primary sector. The first 5-year plan was based on the Harrod-Domar model. The total planned budget of Rs 2069 crore, 2378 crore later, was allocated to 7 broad areas: irrigation and energy 27.2%, agriculture and community development 17.4%, transport and communications 24%, industry 8.4%, social services 16.64%, land rehabilitation 4.1%, and for other sectors and services 2.5%. The most important feature of this phase was the active role of state in all economic sectors. Such a role was justified at that time because immediately after independence, India was facing basic problems, deficiency of capital, and low capacity to save. The target growth rate was 2.1% of annual gross domestic product. The achieved growth rate was 3.6%. The net domestic product went up by 15%. The monsoon was good, and there were relatively high crop yields, boosting exchange reserves and the per capita income, which increased by 8%. National income increased more than the per capita income due to rapid population growth. The Constitution of India, in the directive principles of state policies, state that the state shall, in particular, direct its policy towards securing: first, that citizens, men and women equally, have the right to an adequate means of livelihood; second, that the ownership and control of the resources of the community are so distributed as best to subserve the common good; third, that the operation of the economic system does not result in the concentration of wealth and means of production to the common detriment. In consonance with the spirit of the Constitution of India, the Government of India adopted planning as an instrument for achieving economic progress. Thus, our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, laid the foundation of the planning in India to achieve the goals of economic development. The Prime Minister is the ex officio chairman of the Planning Commission in India. The Planning Commission makes a comprehensive assessment of the resources, both actual and potential. It advises the government as to how to undertake plans in light of the economic policies decided to achieve the various goals. The implementation of plans is the responsibility of the Government of India through the various ministries and departments. There are also mid-term appraisal of plans to check shortfalls and incorporate changes in strategy and policies if need be. It is important for us to know the various objectives of Planning Commission in India. These are: 1. Acceleration of growth rate; 2. Expansion of employment opportunities; 3. Modernization of the economy; 4. Promotion of social justice and reduction of inequality of incomes; 5. Sustainable economic growth; 6. Self-reliance; 7. Economic stability. Let us now study each of these objectives individually. Acceleration of growth rate. One of the basic objectives of planning in India has been to achieve rapid economic growth. During the British rule, the Indian economy was stagnant and suffered from high levels of poverty and deprivation. The British exploited the Indian economy through trade as well as unjust colonial rule. During the last phase of British rule from 1901 to 1946, the growth rate of Indian economy was around 1%. The Indian economy was caught in low levels of income and poverty. Therefore, after attainment of independence, the planning system was adopted to achieve the goals of economic growth and prosperity. Planning as an instrument aimed at increasing national and per capita incomes on the assumption that would eventually reduce poverty and deprivation and raise the standard of living of the masses. The economic growth of a country is achieved through continuous expansion of real national income as well as per capita income. However, apart from the quantitative growth aspect, qualitative aspects like improvements in life expectancy, infant mortality rate, literacy, etc., assume significance. Amartya Sen's capability approach stresses on the availability of freedom and capability to lead the kind of lives that people have reason to value. During the first 3 decades of planning, the rate of growth averaged around 3.5 to 4%, the Hindu growth rate, coined by Professor Rajkrishna. The sixth plan onwards, there was a rise in the rate of growth due to the considerable changes in economy. Expansion of employment opportunities. Right from the first 5 year plan, 1951 to 56, one of the long term objectives of planning in India has been the achievement of full employment. The first 5 year plan stated maximum production and full employment, the attainment of economic equality or social justice, which constitute the accepted objectives of planning under present day conditions, are not really so many different ideas, but a series of related aims which the country must work for. None of the objectives can be pursued to the exclusion of others. A plan of development must place balanced emphasis on all of these. Since poverty is a major problem, the Planning Commission has endeavored to remove poverty through increase in investment and consequent increase in employment opportunities. Modernization of the economy. Modernization of the Indian economy has been one of the foremost objectives to achieve rapid economic growth and also to ensure high levels of productivity in all sectors of the economy. Modernization refers to the structural and institutional change in the economic activities. Modernization aims at improving the standard of living of the masses by adopting better scientific methods of production. Modernization is an attempt to raise the productivity of the economy in general and the sectors in particular. The Green Revolution heralded an era of modernization in the mid 60s in the agriculture sector, with the introduction of seed high yield variety fertilizer water strategy to improvise productivity and raise income levels of farmers. The macroeconomic reforms introduced in the 90s have brought about a great deal of modernization of the economy. Promotion of social justice and reduction of inequality of incomes. The directive principles of state policy enshrined in the Constitution lay down the objective of promotion of social justice and economic justice as one of the foremost duty of the state. Reduction of inequalities of income and equal opportunities for all in the matter of education and employment shall be important objectives of planning in India. The prevalence of large scale poverty in underdeveloped countries results in glaring inequalities and thus the need for measures of social justice and prevention of concentration of economic power. The 5 year plans have consistently tried to uplift the economic condition of the socio-economically weaker sections through a number of target oriented programs. Many states have reduced inequalities in land ownership by adopting land reforms measures. Through the instrument of planning, specific programs in backward areas have been adopted to reduce regional inequalities. Sustainable economic growth. The goal of sustainable economic growth has become an important objective of planning in the interest of intergenerational equity, environment, and the economy. Growth would be unsustainable if the means to achieve it involve greater use of non renewable resources and also ignores the cost on environment. The 5 year plans aim at sustainable economic development by striking a judicious balance between the development needs of the present and future generations. Self reliance. The years of foreign rule had brought a desire to adopt the concept of self reliance as an objective of planning in India. Self reliance means reliance on domestic resources for economic development. The fourth 5 year plan adopted self reliance as the main objective of planning. Basically, it refers to lessening dependence on foreign aid, grants, loans, and thus doing away with dependence on foreign countries. The fourth plan aimed at achieving self sufficiency in the production of food grains. The fifth 5 year plan focused on earning sufficient foreign exchange through export promotion and import substitution, India could achieve self sufficiency in food grain production by the end of the fifth year plan. However, self reliance should not be confused with self sufficiency. While self sufficiency means that the country produces all its needs and does not import, self reliance means the country has enough resources to pay for its imports, and imports are a normal part of economic activities. Let us now try to understand the meaning of strategy. Development strategy refers to the choice of instruments of policy and the course of action from among the available alternatives to achieve the objectives of planning. To quote Dr. I.G. Patel, former governor of the Reserve Bank of India, strategy implies essentially a deliberate choice, a choice of the point and timing and manner of attack on the problem in hand. Strategies have undergone changes with the evolution of time, objectives, technologies, and resources. The second five-year plan set the enunciation of a strategy for the first time by prescribing the heavy capital goods based industrial development. This strategy, also known as the Nehru-Mahalanobis model of growth, the strategy laid down the foundation for industrialization, which was assumed to be the basic condition for rapid economic growth. The first five-year plan did not have any strategy as such, but the second five-year plan did have the heavy industry capital goods based industrialization strategy. Development strategy has been designed to serve the basic objectives of rapid economic growth and social justice. Since India adopted the mixed economy model, the existence of public sector along with the private sector provided the way for economic growth and welfare. In such a setup, the state is supposed to play a positive role in economic activities. The role of public sector was designed to provide commanding heights to the economy and also to influence the composition and direction of economic activities towards establishing a socialist pattern of society. The development strategy had been focusing on a dominant role of the state till the advent of the economic reforms of 90s. Subsequent plans were designed with minimal role of the state and greater role for the private sector and the market. Thus, development strategy has been designed to meet the issues and challenges of the country and also to incorporate dynamism and decentralization in the policy frameworks.
For the first 8 plans, the emphasis was on a growing public sector with massive investments in basic and heavy industries. But since the launch of the ninth plan in 1997, the emphasis on the public sector has become less pronounced, and the current thinking on planning in the country in general is that it should be increasingly of an indicative and regulatory nature. In 2014, the central government, led by Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, decided to wind up the Planning Commission and replace it with a more dynamic organization that is responsive to the needs of the state. The composition of the Commission has undergone a lot of change since its inception, with the Prime Minister as the ex officio chairman. The committee has a nominated deputy chairman who is given the rank of a full cabinet minister. Presently, the post of deputy chairman of the Planning Commission is vacant after the new government in the centre. Cabinet ministers with certain important portfolios act as ex officio members of the Commission, while the full time members are experts of various fields like economics, industry, science, and general administration. Present ex officio members of the Commission are the Finance Minister, the Agricultural Minister, the Home Minister, the Health Minister, the Chemicals and Fertilizers Minister, the Information Technology Minister, the Law Minister, the HRD Minister, and the Minister of State for Planning. The Commission works through various divisions which are of two types. One, the General Planning Divisions, the second, Program Administration Divisions. The majority of experts in the Commission are economists, making the Commission the biggest employer of the Indian Economic Service. Let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. The Planning Commission was set up in 1950. The Prime Minister is the ex officio chairman of the Planning Commission. The first five-year plan was started in 1951. In the first five-year plan, the growth model of Harold Domer was adopted, and the architect of the second five-year plan was P.C. Mahalanobis. The development of heavy industry was thought to be synonymous with industrialization. Industrialization via heavy industry was the way to achieve rapid economic growth. Planning is a means to foster economic development. The Planning Commission set the four long-term objectives of planning. First, the high level of national and per capita income. Second, the full employment. Third, the reduction of inequalities of income and wealth. And fourth, to set up a socialist society based on equality and justice. While planning refers to implementation of policies and programs to achieve objectives, strategy refers to the choice of instruments, timing, and manner from various available alternatives. Strategy is a dynamic concept. It has evolved with time, objectives, and resources. Indian planning was inspired from the Soviet model of planning. India adopted the mixed economy model of development and planning. The public sector was given the commanding heights in the process of industrialization. The leading role of public sector is not accepted in the era of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. The challenges of a mixed economy pose the need for coordination between the public and private sectors. The 1991 reforms led to redefining the role of the state and an increasing role of private sector and markets. Greater emphasis on sustainable economic development in the interest of intergenerational equity and harmony with nature and environment. Planning is indicative and decentralized in nature in the present times.